You know, I don't think so. I've got some things I've been wanting to do for a while, and we've been building cars, we've been really busy. There's definitely a different direction I want to go, and here I can't do both.
Aaron Kaufman spent 5 years building one of the most watched car shows on television without ever watching it himself. He knew that seeing what they did with his work would make going back the next morning impossible. While millions tuned into Fast and Loud, believing they were watching a genuine partnership, something completely different was happening inside that garage. What was actually being hidden behind those cameras? And what did it cost him to disappear from the life he built? Join us as we find out why Aaron Kaufman left Gas Monkey Garage.
So what's happening with your show, man? What are you doing? What's the latest?
Oh shit, you're just gonna go right for the big one, huh?
Let's get in there, man.
All right.
First of all, I love your show. I've been loving it for years. It's fun. And I'm a giant muscle car fan, so it's right up my alley.
Everybody hold on to your hat out there. Fast and Loud is no more.
The partnership that never was. Fast and Loud debuted on June 6, 2012. Built around a contrast Discovery knew would sell. Richard Rawlings, loud and deal-hungry, paired with Aaron Kaufman, quiet and technically gifted. Viewers believed they were watching two men who needed each other equally, and the ratings reflected it. By August, the show was the network's highest-rated series. Discovery had ordered 12 full custom builds in 24 weeks, and Richard agreed to the schedule before asking anyone in the shop whether it was physically possible. Aaron found out when the cameras arrived on the first day of filming, and the timeline was already locked in. There was no meeting, no planning session, no conversation about what it would actually take to deliver 12 finished cars in 6 months. Just a schedule Richard had signed and a shop that now had to make it work. Aaron was logging around 110 hours a week across that first season. He lived 45 miles from the Dallas garage, an hour and a half each way in traffic, so he left home around 5 in the morning and rarely got back before midnight. Some nights, he skipped the drive entirely, slept in a car at the shop, and rinsed off with a hose out back while the cameras kept rolling. His friend, Scott McMillan, who had known Aaron since high school and worked beside him that first season, later calculated that Aaron had logged more than 1,300 hours in the shop across those months. Richard logged around 200. While Aaron was holding the operation together on almost no sleep, Richard was doing interviews, making appearances, and building his public profile on the back of a season Aaron was physically destroying himself to deliver. In unscripted conversations with automotive outlets, Richard described himself primarily as a buyer and seller, someone who spotted value in neglected cars and turned them for profit, with the building side handled by the people he hired. That honesty existed away from the cameras, and the show consistently told a different story that Richard never moved to correct. Before television entered the picture, they had traveled together hauling cars to shows across the country. Richard drove the early miles, then handed the wheel to Aaron, who drove through the night while Richard rested. Richard later described those road trips as some of the best moments of his life. Long conversations, shared ambitions, and the feeling of building something from nothing together. Aaron rarely mentioned them. One man had been remembering a friendship across all those miles. The other had been remembering a job, and that gap between the two of them had been there long before any camera showed up to paper over it. They completed all 12 builds, something no other television shop had managed at that point, and the show kept growing. Gas Monkey Bar and Grill launched in Dallas. Gas Monkey Energy followed. Licensing deals ran alongside the television contract, and the brand expanded in every direction, with Richard's name and face attached to all of it. Aaron's name was on none of it. Richard's name was on every contract, every deal, and every product the brand produced. But what happened when the show started reaching into Aaron's actual identity? the slow erosion. 5 years into Fast and Loud, Aaron Kaufman had watched exactly 3 episodes out of more than 100, the premiere and 2 Pikes Peak episodes at a friend's viewing party where declining would have made things awkward. Every other episode across 5 seasons he had deliberately avoided, and when people pushed him on why, his reasoning was precise. If he watched and hated what he saw, the editing choices, the way his dynamic with Richard was being framed on screen, the narrative the show was constructing around both of them, he had zero control over any of it. The footage was already shot, the cuts were already locked, and the version of events the network had decided to tell was going out to millions of viewers, whether Aaron approved of it or not. Watching and hating it would make going back to the shop the next morning nearly impossible. So he made the decision early to keep his head down, build the cars to the best of his ability, and never watch the finished product. As long as he never saw how the show was framing him, he could keep functioning inside the system that was built around it. The creative restrictions that tightened around him every season made it increasingly difficult to find genuine reasons to care about the work. In 2013, Aaron built a 1963 Ford Falcon for the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, twin-turbocharged, heavily fabricated, the kind of technically demanding project that gave him a real reason to come in every morning. After that build wrapped, the network changed direction, and future projects had to be smaller, faster, and cheaper to fit the format. Aaron pitched an EcoBoost-powered De Tomaso Pantera next, a complex build that would have needed at least 12 weeks of serious custom fabrication and engineering. It was rejected almost immediately. Too expensive, too slow, too far outside what the show needed. Every ambitious idea he brought forward after that met the same answer, and eventually he stopped expecting a different one. Around 2014, Aaron decided he wanted to shave his beard and mentioned it to producers expecting a routine conversation. They told him no, and Aaron told them directly that he did not respond well to being told he could not do something, and that if they wanted him to keep the beard, all they had to do was ask nicely. If they kept refusing, he would drive to the nearest drugstore, buy a razor, and shave it on camera in front of everyone. The producers changed their tone immediately and asked nicely, and Aaron agreed to keep it. But the exchange had exposed something that could not be ignored afterward. The beard had been incorporated into the show's brand identity without anyone consulting him. And if the production was prepared to assert control over something as basic as his own face, the question of what else was being managed without his knowledge or agreement was no longer a hypothetical. By 2016, Aaron had stopped bringing new project ideas to anyone entirely. He showed up, built whatever he was told to build, and played his assigned role on camera without putting anything personal into it. McMillan watched the shift happen from inside the shop across multiple seasons, and later said the strain had become visible to everyone working there well before Aaron made any formal move to leave. The show had taken his hours, his creative direction, and his physical appearance, but the moment that actually finished it arrived alone in an empty parking lot. The parking lot. Late in 2016, Aaron sat alone in his truck in the Gas Monkey parking lot with the engine off and the lights out. Another 16-hour day behind him, waiting in the silence to feel something. Pride in what he had built. Frustration at how the day had gone. Even the basic tiredness that usually followed a long shift. Nothing came through, just a flatness sitting in his chest that the silence did nothing to shift. He started planning quietly in the weeks that followed, calling contacts across the industry and asking about available shop spaces around Dallas, sketching out business structures late at night when sleep would not come, researching equipment suppliers, and looking into what it would actually cost to build something from scratch without a production company behind it. The concept that kept returning was classic Ford F-100 trucks from the late 50s through the late 70s, vehicles he understood deeply, with a loyal owner community that the major aftermarket companies had largely ignored. There was a real business opportunity sitting inside that gap, and more importantly, it was the kind of work he could build a real business around without anyone else controlling the pace or the outcome. He settled on the name ArcLight Fabrication and told nobody what he was planning until everything was in place. When he first formally asked to leave Fast and Loud, the network refused immediately and put more money on the table, assuming that was the issue. Aaron told them it was not. When they pressed him on what he actually wanted, his answer was straightforward: freedom, nothing else, just the ability to move on. Negotiations stretched across several months, and Richard learned about Aaron's plans through producers, rather than in any direct conversation between the two of them. Richard's public statement positioned the departure as something that had caught him off guard, not his decision, and not something that would slow the shop down in any meaningful way. Aaron chose not to respond publicly, and in later interviews, he kept the explanation brief and factual. He wanted to build complex, time-intensive projects. The show needed quick and inexpensive turnarounds, and 14 years of accumulated personal and professional differences sat underneath all of it. Aaron's final episode aired in March 2017, and the shift in the show's dynamic was immediately apparent to the audience. Fast and Loud continued for a few more seasons before Discovery quietly ended it in 2020 without any formal announcement. He had walked away from every resource that had supported his career for 14 years. But could he actually build something real without any of it? What freedom actually costs. ArcLight Fabrication existed as a name and a business structure, but everything Richard had assembled around Gas Monkey over 5 years of television, the sponsorship relationships, the licensing infrastructure, the media connections, the brand recognition that came from being on Discovery every week, none of that transferred when Aaron walked out. He was starting with his skills, a focused idea about a specific truck that most of the industry had overlooked, and nothing else behind him. No network, no production budget. The shop opened in late 2017 with a small, hand-picked crew, no cameras, and no production schedule telling anyone how fast a build had to move. For the first time in more than a decade, Aaron was answerable only to the work itself and the customers who brought it to him. And the early months of running a business without a network infrastructure turned out to be significantly harder than anything 14 years of television deadlines had prepared him for. At Gas Monkey, Richard had handled every administrative and commercial function, keeping the operation financially viable from payroll, vendor contracts, sponsorship negotiations, licensing arrangements, media relationships, and the entire business architecture. Aaron had never needed to engage with it because someone else was always managing it. The moment that structure was gone, the full weight of it transferred onto Aaron's desk with no transition period and no one to explain how any of it worked. Hiring decisions, inventory management, cash flow, supplier disputes, marketing strategy, customer communication, and equipment maintenance, none of it paused while he figured things out. He later said openly that running a business turned out to be harder than anything television had ever put him through. And the pressure showed up in every part of his life outside the shop. His relationship absorbed a significant amount of the strain. His dogs were barely seeing him, and the employees who had come to work at ArcLight, specifically because of who Aaron was, noticed how stretched he had become during those early months and quietly wondered whether the operation was going to stabilize. It did. ArcLight's specific focus on 1957 through 1979 Ford F-100 trucks gave the shop a clear identity within a community that had been waiting for someone to take those vehicles seriously. And as finished projects started coming out, the word spread among owners and enthusiasts who cared about the quality of the work rather than how quickly it could be turned around. The business found its footing slowly, and without any external machine accelerating it. Discovery came back with another offer, and Craig Kaufman, the same executive who had helped bring Fast and Loud to air, flew to Dallas personally to make the case for a new show. Aaron turned it down initially, having no interest in renegotiating the autonomy he had just spent months fighting to establish. Kaufman kept pushing, and they eventually landed on terms Aaron could genuinely accept. His choice of projects, his pace, his final say over the creative direction. Shifting Gears with Aaron Kaufman premiered on March 5, 2018, with the first major build being a monster truck purpose-built for King of the Hammers, one of the most technically demanding off-road competitions in the world, and precisely the kind of project networks had previously dismissed as too risky for television. 2 seasons aired to positive responses before Discovery moved on. Pike's Peak in 2022 meant something different from anything else in that period. Aaron had built a car for that mountain back in 2013, invested months of serious fabrication work into it, and then watched someone else take it up the course while the cameras captured the footage the show needed. That had stayed with him across nearly a decade. When he went back in 2022, he went as the driver, behind the wheel of Old Smoky, a 1,400 horsepower 1949 Ford F1 truck, running the exhibition division with a time of 14 minutes, 5.792 seconds, and placing 12th overall. He had spent years preparing other people's vehicles for that mountain and handing over the keys. That run belonged entirely to him. By the 2024 SEMA Awards, Aaron was announcing a new collaboration with legendary builder Paul Tutul Sr., centered on American custom cars and culture. A new partner, a new project, and the same terms he had been operating on since 2017. His timeline, his creative direction, nobody else setting the pace. What did Aaron Kaufman actually think about Richard Rawlings when there was nobody left to manage his answer? The real verdict. The meeting at ArcLight Fabrication was uncomfortable before it properly got started. A journalist from D Magazine had come out to the shop, and a Discovery Channel PR representative was standing nearby with the clear intention of keeping things from going too far off script. Aaron pushed back hard on the first question and came close to walking out on 2 separate occasions during the conversation, partly because of where the interview was heading, and partly because having a network representative in the room felt uncomfortably similar to the kind of oversight he had spent years trying to get away from. When the journalist mentioned he drove a Prius, Aaron responded by walking through the complete environmental logic of hybrid vehicle ownership. The costs embedded in battery production, the dependency on hydroelectric grid infrastructure, the full manufacturing footprint, and the long-term disposal problem that rarely enters the conversation when people congratulate themselves on their fuel economy. He concluded that the journalist's decision-making process was clearly compromised, then added without particular hostility that he did not personally dislike him. When the conversation moved to Richard, Aaron did not take the route most people expected. He did not describe dishonesty or deliberate exploitation or any kind of calculated cruelty. Richard had genuine strengths, but he was consistently failing to use them properly because he was too committed to performing a version of himself that did not reflect reality. Richard understood how to build a brand, how to work a room, how to host an event that people wanted to attend, and how to network in a way that created real commercial value. The problem was that Richard kept insisting on positioning himself as a technically skilled car builder, as someone whose authority in the automotive world came from fabrication expertise and hands-on mechanical knowledge that he simply did not possess. The financial gap between the two men needed nothing added to it. Aaron's estimated net worth sat at $8 million, and Richard's estimated net worth in 2026 sat somewhere between 25 and 30 million. The face of the brand on one side and the person who built what the brand was selling on the other. Aaron said he did not hate Richard and that he had learned from the experience of working with him. As of 2026, ArcLight Fabrication operates out of Grand Prairie, Texas, building components and completing custom F-100 projects for a community that came to know Aaron long after the Gas Monkey cameras had stopped rolling. His Instagram carries 852,000 followers, and his Facebook page holds over 3 million, with brand ambassador work for MagnaFlow running alongside active development collaborations with Life Motorsport and Sierra Cars. Richard continued building Gas Monkey in a different direction, past 1.53 million YouTube subscribers, with Gas Monkey Sturgis open in South Dakota, Gas Monkey Ice House operating in The Colony, Texas, since May 2025, and a custom electric motorcycle unveiled under the Gas Monkey name at the 2026 Mama Tried Motorcycle Show in Milwaukee. A civil lawsuit connected to the Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, involving disputed claims worth roughly $6 million and filed in 2018, was settled by both parties in August 2021, with all claims dismissed. The two men do not stay in contact, and neither has made any move to change that. 14 years of shared history sitting between them with nothing further added to it on either side. Do you think Richard ever genuinely saw Aaron as a partner? Or was that always just a story the brand needed people to believe? And looking at that gap between $8 million and $30 million, do you think Aaron left too late? Or did he get out at exactly the right moment? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.